Well, this morning, Canadians woke up to a new minority government for Justin Trudeau. We've talked about the challenges for the Liberals in provinces such as Alberta and Quebec, but Ontario was a strong performer for the party. That includes Toronto. Finance Minister Bill Morneau easily won re-election in his Toronto Centre riding, and he joins us this morning in studio. Good morning.
Morning. It's good to be on your show.
Get much sleep last night?
I got some.
You did?
I'll have to get a little more tonight.
Your voice is holding up, though.
Is
That's
it? Good.
Pretty good,
Good.
Yeah.
I guess, for this campaign, a lot of people are looking at what happened last night. There's a lot of comparisons to 2015. How did this campaign feel to you versus then?
Obviously, this was a very different campaign. When you've been in government for 4 years, you have a record. From my perspective, I was obviously in Toronto Centre, but in many other ridings. And I heard people talking about the need to continue investing in them and their families. I certainly heard a real sense of concern that we need to deal with the climate change challenge. And in a urban riding like Toronto, we heard about issues like gun safety and people's concern for their children. So there were a number of issues that were important. I think all of those will be things that we'll be able to move forward on.
Deficits didn't really come up as a major issue, and in fact, between the Liberals and the Conservatives, there wasn't a lot of daylight when it came to your own projections for a budget, except there was no end date for deficits on your platform. Do you have a secret one penciled in the back of your mind that you can share?
I love that. I get that question in every different format. Where I always start is you always need to think about where is the current situation, and our fiscal situation in the federal government is very strong. I mean, we have a debt to GDP that's positive. We're much better off than other G7 countries. Our continued plan is to reduce that deficit as a function of our economy and to make sure that we have the firepower in case there's any challenges ahead.
So that is the pushback, is that you're spending in these good times and that you might not have the firepower. We were speaking with the strategist David Doyle, who said you compound the fact that this recession might actually be worse because of how leveraged the private sector is, and the fiscal federal picture kind of masks the fact that provinces are quite levered as well, and that could force your hand more aggressively.
We obviously have to think about all levels of government and the challenge that individuals, that Canadians face. I do think, though, as long as we're reducing our debt as a function of our economy, as long as we're reducing our deficit as a function of our economy, that's the sort of situation we need to be resilient in the face of challenges.
Are you going to be able to do that if you're a partner in stabilizing the government as the NDP and they have their own spending demands?
Well, our approach will be very much to be fiscally responsible. We do know that that's important. It's important for Canadians. We might not have been talking about this issue a lot on the newscasts during the election campaign, but I had many people come to me and emphasize the importance of fiscal responsibility, and that's something we're going to take to heart.
And we have been getting different opinions this morning. I mean, there are those who are raising that question of what happens if the NDP need to find some compromise with you guys and there's more spending. Then Kurt Ryman of BlackRock comes on this morning. I mean, they have more than $6 trillion in assets under management, and they said Canada's in a position where it can do what you guys have tabled to do. But there are other issues as well, issues like energy. Obviously, that's a big one that we've talked a lot about on this network. You used to be chair of the C.D. Howe Institute. You know Bill Robson well. He was on this network this morning. The words he used about where Trans Mountain goes from here, quite interesting to me. He described it as radioactive. He said it is incredibly challenged in moving forward given what has happened with this minority government. What are your views on where Trans Mountain goes from here, given this new government?
My continuing view, and we'll be pushing forward on this issue, is that we need to ensure that we can get access to international markets for our resources. We need to have a cost-effective and safe way to get our resources from one place to another. And at the same time, we need to be thinking about how we deal with the long-term trend towards more renewable sources of energy. So we're going to have a price on pollution across this country. I think that was an important outcome from last night. We saw a broad consensus on that issue. And at the same time, we're going to be responsible in terms of thinking about how our resource sector can get its resources to market in a way that is not only cost-effective and safe, but also trying to drive down greenhouse gas emissions as they do it.
But again, as you look to making this minority government stable, there is a concern, if you read all the Bay Street strategist notes today, that your hand might be forced by the NDP. Can you say unequivocally that if that is a condition of their support, that you shelve or don't move ahead with the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, that's a non-starter.
Well, what I can say for sure is that we've moved forward on this project because we know it's the right thing to do. We were dealing with an impasse between provinces. We have a recognition that we've got a current situation where these resources are being used, and there's an opportunity for us to do that in a more effective way. So the Trans Mountain Pipeline and the expansion, there's a purpose behind what we set out to do, and we're going to push forward with that continuing objective.
Has the fact that the Liberals were shut out of Alberta and Saskatchewan resonated with you in terms of the economic conditions and prospects that they're faced with that many point to as a direct result of some of these policies?
What it says to me is that we're going to have to do some real outreach to people in Saskatchewan and Alberta. It's not lost on me or on us that we have challenges there. We need to make sure that we get out, we listen to people's concerns, that we address them, that we recognize our economic challenges in those provinces as a result of the energy sector and the issues that it faces. And we do that while being consistent with our overall goal of having an economy that's looking towards the future and more sources of renewable energy.
One thing it felt like we didn't hear much about on the campaign trail was China. And yet China seems to be at the center of almost everything we're talking about right now. What should we think about this new government's going to be thinking about when it comes to the tensions surrounding China, whether it's the direct relationship between China and Canada or how Canada navigates the China-U.S. trade talks right now?
You've seen a direction from our government, a clear point of view that we need to aggressively say that the imprisonment of two Canadians in China is just not acceptable. At the same time, what we know is that we need to have a dialogue. That's why we appointed an ambassador to China. We've seen some changes during the course of this election campaign in the U.S.-China dialogue. There's been some movement there. So I will be, I was in text communication with Steven Mnuchin, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, this morning and last night, and I'm sure I'll be engaging with him, as my colleagues will be engaging with their colleagues to try and continue to move forward on files that matter. China, it is a difficult moment. We're going to continue to try and make a difference in that relationship.
Did he text you congratulations? What was going on there?
Well, he texted me, first of all, last night to say, so what's going to happen? And
I was asking you.
Asking me. I told him, I think it'll be a Liberal minority, but I'll get back to you later. And then he got back to me late last night congratulating us.
Did he tell you how his own negotiations are going with China?
That's an ongoing discussion that of course we have.
Doesn't resonate on text.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you about SNC-Lavalin, one of the top performing stocks right now on the TSX, presumably on the perception that with your government back in power that a deferred prosecution agreement is more likely, is it?
I haven't seen and don't really pay attention to individual company stocks at this stage.
Well, there it is, up 7.5%.
I think from our perspective, that's a continuing discussion that the Justice Minister will have to have. I really have no insights into that file. Okay,
before you go, real quickly, you have been Finance Minister. Is that a role you would like to continue in as part of this new government?
Well, I've obviously enjoyed having the opportunity to make an impact in Canada. Our goal is to continue to make an important impact on families' lives. From my personal perspective, we will all look towards the Prime Minister as he takes his decisions in the coming days, and I'll be pleased to serve in whatever role makes most sense.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Okay.
Maybe we can take a closer look at those texts with Mnuchin or something
thanks.
like that. Finance Minister Bill Morneau, winner of the Toronto Centre riding last night.